everybody, and welcome to another model tank chat with Spartan086. And today we're doing Henschel's Tiger 1. Yep, Forces of Valor's bad boy. So as you can see, I have 7 in front of me. This is the 7 originals that Forces of Valor Unimax did. All of them fantastic colouring. We'll go through each individual one. There's things about them that are very unique, and let me just point off the top, this is my favourite tank pretty much ever. Yes, I'm one of those guys who adores the Tiger. Yep, the guy you avoid. So a wee bit of history to the vehicle. The Tiger 1, as it was known, or by its proper designation, the Panzerkampfwagen Mark 6H, and the H standing for Henschel. Obviously the German translations, it basically means armoured combat wagon slash vehicle, either way you want to put it, Mark 6. So the idea behind the Tiger came even before the start of the war. The idea with Guderian's views on Blitzkrieg was there was a need for a breakout tank. If they obviously hit a punch of hard defences, then they would need something a wee bit better armoured, a bit of firepower to smash through, break the lines, get the breakthrough started, and then the smaller panzers could start the rampage. So obviously this idea came around. The idea for the tank at the time was that it should be under 30 tons. What a laugh we'll have about that. So this went on. Obviously, as the occupation of territories began, obviously with Czechoslovakia and annexation of areas, they started to realise that, and looking at enemy anti-tank weapons, especially with the Czechs were very well armed at the time. The defences, if they decided to put up a defence against the Germans, would have been catastrophic. Actually, even by German recommendations, they would have been catastrophic for them. Sadly, the Czechs gave in to the League of Nations and decided to be overrun by Hitler's forces. So come around to September, and the Germans decide that put their plans into action. They begin the invasion of Poland. A few days later, if it's not as bad for the Poles, they get invaded by Soviet Russia. So a wee bit more why the Tiger came about was little known facts. For those of us who actually do a lot of in-depth history will know that it wasn't a breeze as much as it's made out to be for the Germans. The Germans came up against some well-entrenched Polish forces with some very good anti-tank weapons. German tank losses, which if you really look into it, show you how bad it was for them. Started to realise that the Mark IIs were not up to scratch and were not nearly as good as they thought. Yeah, great when you got a breakthrough and your tank can roll 50 miles without opposition, and it's only light, even if it is opposition, it's light opposition. So what they came up against were these well entrenched Poles. So obviously the views of Guderian was surround it, move on, but even then they were still taking severe losses. Fair dues, the Poles put up a fantastic fight, but when you get two massive powers breaking in, there's not much you can do. So eventually Poland falls, and it goes back to OKW, which is the German High Command, and they began a review of tank losses and what they could do. So after serious review, they realised we do need a better tank, a breakthrough tank that's needed. So proposals were put out, and one of them went out to a Deutschland company. Forgive me, I've forgotten the name, apologies. Just so you know, guys, I was wanting to do this without any real research, because, as I say, this is my favourite tank. I was trying to do everything from knowledge in my brain. So forgive me if I do forget things or I mistakenly say things. I was trying to impress myself by showing my knowledge. So obviously this went out to the companies, and one of the companies, a Deutschland company, I've forgotten the name as I said, they began to look on an idea of a heavier tank, over 30 tons. Obviously, nowhere near what it is today. One of the views was the idea of taking what would be the Mark III chassis and mounting a different type of turret on it. Probably you'll find that this is where the Mark IV comes from, this idea. Lo and behold, next, the Third Reich decides it's time to take away the Danes and invade Norway. Obviously, for the resources, Norway's got a large amount of ore and things that the Germans needed. So, next, Denmark falls, then Norway falls. Eventually, von Manstein's plan goes into action. Well, part of his plan goes into action, I should say, about going through the Ardennes. German forces invade Belgium, Holland and Luxembourg. The French forces, in support of their colleagues to the north, along with the British Expeditionary Force, move north into the lowland countries and begin to fight the Germans. Now, from the get-go, it was a losing war, a losing battle. The Germans had decided to punch through the Ardennes, thereby encircling the Allies, and obviously we know the rest with the Dunkirk evacuation. What came about from this was a lot of things. German anti-tank weapons were found to be completely useless. You had your 37mm, which proved, as I said in another video, useless against Matilda IIs with a thick armour. The other thing was the French had the Char 1B. Now, this thing at the time was one of the biggest tanks in the world, only after the Soviets' T-35, I think it was, T-37. Oh, God, I've forgotten, sorry. So, basically it was a big lang tank. This thing has multiple turrets, multiple cannons. It was just a battleship on tracks. Realised that their tanks were completely under-armoured and undergunned compared to the Char B. So, contracts were put out again about getting something. Two companies were nominated. One of them was Henschel and one of them was Porsche. Now, these are quite important because both of these designs end up becoming more. Well, one becomes the Tiger, the other one becomes more, I should say, sorry. So, after all this time, Barbarossa comes around. Operation Barbarossa, invasion of the Soviet Union. The largest invasion ever, as they want to say. Obviously, what happens? So, as German forces go in the clash with the Soviets, they start to find that the Soviets, even though they have 20,000 tanks, which are considered obsolete, they start to encounter two very well-designed tanks. Obviously, the T-34-76 and the KV-1. And obviously the KV-2, I should say the KV series. So, realising this, they asked for a speed up of this heavy breakthrough tank. Obviously, when they encounter the T-34, they start to realise that their Mark IIIs and Mark IVs are just useless against this. So that's where your Panther comes from, but we're not going to get into that. So the contract went out. Designation Victor Kilo 4501, and this was what came around in 1941 when it was shown to Hitler. And you had the two designs. You had Henschels and then you had Porsches. Now, if anybody watches Mark Felton, look for The Last Tiger or The Lost Tiger. It's a great episode to watch, and it's about Porsche's design for the Tiger. What should also be noted is that Henschel's original design didn't carry this turret. That's quite important because when Krupp designed the turrets, they designed this for Porsches. The original design for Henschel's one was a very... it was more sloped, as I remember seeing it in some books. What we then get at this demonstration for Hitler was two tanks. Probably both of them broke down. I'm sure I read that both of them had broke down, but Henschel's overall was the better design. compared to Porsche's. Now, when I say better design, that doesn't mean that it was the best. It just was better than the other one and not being as bad. Porsche's design called for an electric petrol petrol turbine engine, which meant a large amount of copper wiring needed to be used for the vehicle, which the Germans didn't have. And if you want to produce a large amount of tanks, you can't just throw all your copper wiring into them. There was other things to do with suspension and how the wheels run, and if you've seen the video that I did on the Ferdinand Elephant, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's where Porsche's design eventually became. He did produce a small amount of them who went into service. They eventually become command vehicles. Now they still packed magnificent 88, but they were overall not classed as being the main tanks to go into battle. They became command and control vehicles, usually for squadron or company for the Germans at the time, possibly battalion or regimental operations officers. So Henschel won, and what we got was a tank that was at the start around about 50 tons, big tank, carrying a Maybach L210 P45 engine, which gave it about 650 horsepower. Now, this was totally inadequate for the tank. It put a lot of problems on it, especially with the transmission. But the one amazing thing that did go into the Tiger that we will appreciate today was a magnificent steering system. It was basically one of the first ever power steering systems. Was our first one ever going to tank. Now obviously at the time, tank was 2 levers, back and forth, change direction just by using the track, slowing one track down or stopping one track at the side, the other one then moves and it pushes the tank round in which direction. It was discovered that this would be too impossible to do for the transmission, for the tracks, for sprockets, for everything. It'd be too much for them to take. So Henschel came up with the idea of power steering, and it did solve a lot of problems. I'm not going to say it solved the problem, but it solved a lot of problems for tank drivers. As time went on, obviously, we know that this bad boy went into battle. Really, its first major battle was Kursk, but its first battle was at Leningrad. Madman Hitler decided that when this monster needed to be put to use, it had to be in Arctic conditions and to be the one that break through the Leningrad defences. Why he didn't listen to his commanders, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. So he sent the 4 of them up there. He sent 4 tanks up there, all of which, apart from one, sorry, broke down, 2 get captured or were destroyed, and 1 of them had to be recovered. Again, I've been in the previous video when I talked about the German half-track, about how it was 3 of them had to be used to recover a Tiger. So you can imagine the logistics of trying to get that done. So, fights at Kursk proved that it was a formidable machine. It could take the hits and keep on rolling, as was seen with one tank which took over 200 hits. I think that was wrong. I think that's wrong. But it took on, I think there was also a Tiger that took on 50 T-34s and smashed them and malleted them. And it was not put out of action. So that just shows you that the tank, its armour, its ability, it's the fact that it could stand off with the 88 and take out targets. Now obviously the 88 is based upon the Flak 88. So it shows you the formidable ability of this gun in hitting its targets. The fact that the armour as well at the front was about 210 millimeters to, yeah, about 210 millimeters thick, just shows you how well protected it was. And you know, you read some of the autobiographies by certain tank crews, they'll tell you how comfortable they felt in the Tiger at the beginning. You know, you could hear the rounds pinging off from the T-34s. So obviously we know all about Kursk. Even though it was the wrecking ball there, it wasn't enough, and it went, obviously the Germans began their defensive retreat back to Germany. So while I was talking about the engine, obviously it was extremely underpowered. The Germans discovered this and decided to change it. Maybach offered them, and they did accept, the HL230 P45, which produced a 700 horsepower, which they considered enough. I don't know how, it's crazy. Minimum I would have thought for this bad boy would have been about 800 horsepower. So between 1942 and 1944, 1,347 of these monsters were produced. And they really did have the effect the Germans wanted. You talk to most guys who have visited Bovey, everybody, including myself, first thing I want to see is 131. Now it's great when you get into the Tiger corner, you'll see Jag Tiger, you'll see the King Tigers, but I want to see 131. It is like a childhood thing for me, even as a young boy, reading about the Tiger and about the fear it put in the crews. I mean, when the British first encountered this in North Africa, it was a whole new ball game for them. Even at the time when they were fighting against the Mark 3s and 4s, it was a hard one to fight them. But when this came, it was just non-stop for them. And obviously Tiger phobia, as you'll hear, came about. Two variants of the Tiger were also used. One was the Berg Tiger, which was very small in amount, and it was mostly done by units. Obviously with the weight of the Tiger, it was hard to get vehicles to pull them out. So sometimes they would convert one of the Tigers to become a Berg Tiger, and it'd be able to do recoveries. The other one was the Storm Tiger, which was Storm Tiger, or Assault Tiger. And we'll get to that in a wee second about Forces of Valor and how they're going to do it. The other thing I want to talk about as well is Tiger Aces. Now we've all heard of Michael Wittmann, Otto Carius, but there's a few that aren't as well known. One of them is Kurt Nisbel, which was the Ace of Aces. Now, if, like I said, you're really into your history, you'll know who I'm talking about. If not, look him up. He wasn't SS, he was German Army here, and he was well known as the oddball. Right, so if you've seen Kelly's Heroes, that's the image you should get for Kurt Nisbel. He was not a Nazi, he was a soldier through and through, and he didn't get the recognition that he deserved through the German armed forces, because obviously he didn't believe in the crap that's put forward with Aryan supremacy and subhumanity that obviously the Nazis put on Eastern Europeans such as Slavs and Poles, etc. The other ones I wanted to talk about were Martin Schroef, who, by the way, was the second highest scoring tank ace, Tiger tank ace of the war, with 160 kills. Should be remembered as well as anybody. Paul Tiger, who was another tank ace, and Hans Bolter. Now, Hans Bolter was sitting above Michael Wittmann and just below Otto Carius, so that shows you that there's a lot of these guys that get missed out, possibly on their politics, but we all know that Michael Wittmann was a dedicated Nazi, not taking away from the fact that he was an amazing tank commander, and he is well respected by those who enjoy their history because of Villers Bocage. Now I could go on and on and on and on about the history of the tank, but I don't want to. I can do that in a later video. I have 7 other tanks to do of the Tiger series. These are all customized versions, and we will get into that in another video. So leave it at that. We'll talk about Forces of Valor's version now. So as you can see, we've got 7 in front of us, all different styles, etc. So obviously we've got our winter version here. We have Normandy version. This was Eastern Europe 44. This was another one. It was Eastern Europe 44. Normandy. This was Eastern Front 43, I think, and this was same again, Normandy. Now the fact is, you actually have 2 versions, and these go under the Unimax's idea of producing 2 different ones based on just making more money, basically relabeling it and putting a wee bit of a sheen on it. You can basically see as you go in, it's the same, exact same pattern done for both vehicles, just one's a wee bit darker and it's outlay. The enthusiasts, the collection as they called it. So overall, the version they produced was the late production Tiger, as you can see, obviously with the front headlamp being in the middle. You'll see, if you look up the Tigers early, mid and late production, you'll see the differences obviously with headlamps and smoke dischargers, etc. There's also the other productions that had the massive filter system. If you've seen 131, you'll know what I'm talking about. As I said before, once they got a mould, that was pretty much what they did. They just stuck to the mould with everything about it. The only Tiger that was different was obviously this Tiger here. This Tiger came with extra troops, and it also came with the position of a log stuck on the side. Now this was obviously to do with how the Soviets did things as an added measure of protection, also for the fact that it could be used if the vehicle got stuck or needed to get itself out of a place. You know, the Soviets became quite adept at using natural features to do this. Overall, the early versions of the Tiger were fantastic. See in front of me, the only one that I would have a beef with is almost the tiger stripe kind of effect to it. This one, not a lot was done to it. You'll find that a lot of guys who do customizations to Tigers will snap these bad boys up and just repaint them. They go for about 40 quid if you're lucky, and you can repaint it and do it in a design that you like. Not got a problem with that. The reason for that is that the vehicle was shoddily done, the paintwork was crap, there was no weathering, no rustic effect done, quick slapdash job compared to the rest. I mean, if you look at this one, this Normandy version 331 is magnificent in how they've done it. The paint scheme's fantastic, there is a bit of weathering done, rustic effect, it just looks great. You look to the Arctic version, you can see that even though it looks like a rush dash paint job, it did kind of give you the effect of that's what it was for the German armed forces at the time. This one here, Eastern Front, this was with, can't remember what the Armstrong line unit was, I think it was 101. It just shows you, this was my first ever Forces of Valor tank, and it is an absolute beast. It's still my favourite. When I was in the forces, I kept this on a shelf for everybody to see. Everybody was a wee talking point. I think one guy tried to nab it at one point. No chance, fella, that's not going anywhere. So overall, the original Forces of Valor Unimax tanks were brilliant. As I say, there's only one that I would fault. The other thing you'll see as well with it is if you go in, you'll see on the commander's capula, you'll see the MG mount for the 34 anti-aircraft weapon. Looks great there, as you can have a wee look. Thick, sturdy, and compare it to that floppy, thin piece of crap. They really went all out here when they were just trying to save money. Anything else to talk about the vehicle? Obviously, hatches and that open, just at the top. Obviously driver and radio operator assisted driver doesn't. The back of the vehicle does open, but I'm not going to get into that now because I can't be bothered trying to open and close them. They do open. You can get access both to the engine compartment and you can get access to the radiators. The wheels do move on all the vehicles, as do the tracks. Certain ones you will get ones that move in unison, others you don't. It just happens to be a hit or miss when it comes to them. That's all I can say about it is I love these tanks. I absolutely do. My missus thinks that I'm in love with these more than I am with her. Don't tell her. But I do love these ones. I am looking forward to the new Forces of Valor collections that are coming out. You're going to have early, mid and late production Tigers. You also get specialist versions. I have asked them. They have clarified that there will be specialist versions based on Tiger races. So you will have Michael Wittman, Otto Carius, and I think they say Kurt Nisbel as well. So over the moon with that. That is a great one for the guys. You're also going to have out soon is the Sturm Tiger. So that's another good one to get. Would recommend them. I have put myself on the waiting list for the Sturm Tiger. They are doing different variants as well of each vehicle. So you will have almost like a collector's edition to get. Yep, everybody's got to make money. And if you're willing to pay it, fair dues. So you're going to have extras in them where you might get 2 engines instead of just the one sitting out. You will get extra shells, you'll get extra things that you will get with the vehicle based on the history of the vehicle, etc, etc. So it's something to very well look into and talk to Forces of Valor, which you can do through their Facebook page. They say they'll usually reply within a day. Give them a few days, maybe a week at most. Apparently they're working too hard at the moment about getting vehicles out, and a lot of guys are on them about it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. The next one to go up will be of the modified Tigers, and hopefully that won't be long. I'll get that up. Apologies about the lateness of this video. I'm back at work now, so I'm doing long shifts, trying to get everybody back on their feet. I do hope everybody's well. Obviously now things are supposed to be going back to normal, but they're not. We're looking at either the possibility of a second wave or the first wave just coming back at us. I hope everybody's well, everybody stays safe, and until the next video, take care, bye bye.